Hi guys, Talisha from P3 here. Today what we're going to be discussing is how what we focus on during the initial consultation can either set us up for success or fast track us to treatment failure. Now, if you'd like some help on how to formulate more well-considered, better structured and meaningful rehabilitation programs for your clients, I encourage you to download the Movement Prescription Blueprint, which you can get from progressivepodiatryproject.com/blueprint. And let's get into today's discussion. The Progressive Podiatry Project, here to share knowledge, insights and information for you to improve your clinical practice and, most importantly, help you help your clients. Now, one of the most common ways that lead to this fast track to failure is by clinicians focusing on the theatrics of objective assessments during the initial consultation, as opposed to focusing on asking better questions, which will give you better results. So first up, what do I mean by the theatrics of objective assessments? Now, the caveat to this is I'm referring in this situation to more chronic and complex musculoskeletal presentations. So when it comes to assessing and managing acute injuries, post-operative rehabilitation and making return to sport / return to play decisions, I'm all about the objective assessments. They have a huge role in our treatment decision-making process there. However, in the chronic and complex musculoskeletal presentations that we see, oftentimes there's a lot more going on than simply what an objective assessment will lead us to have an understanding of. So essentially, the theatrics of objective assessments is more so referring to us wasting our time during that initial consultation with someone on gathering information that will have little to no relevance for what this person actually needs and what will formulate a successful management plan for this individual. Now, when we have a musculoskeletal presentation coming into the clinic, it's very easy and very common for clinicians to sort of default to the objective assessments. And there's oftentimes a few reasons for this. So one of the main reasons I feel is that clinicians more often than not can still focus and look at things through the biomedical lens, which part of that is because of our training. So even like in universities where they're teaching our up-and-coming podiatrists and allied health professionals, there is more of a shift towards introducing some of these biopsychosocial management strategies and how we can implement this. But it's still in its relative infancy and it's still not being, I don't feel, done sufficiently. So there's still, the training exists even now, is oftentimes focused and looking through this biomedical lens. And then even those of us that have been practicing for 10, 15, 20, however many years, very much back then when we were going through university, it was very, very biomedical. So one of the reasons that people may, again, fall into that sort of, I'll just look at things purely from an objective standpoint, is we've been trained to look at things through a biomedical lens. So that's the first problem. And then the second instance that can contribute to this, and it can be a little bit of an overlap, oftentimes it can be kind of clinicians falling back into a comfort zone. So when we're dealing with chronic and complex presentations and there's a lot going on and there's multiple layers that we kind of need to unpack with someone, oftentimes if we're a bit uncertain on how to approach this, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, it can be a default that we fall back to where it's just, I'm not really sure what we should be doing. So I will, at least if I'm looking like I'm doing something, so let's just say a biomechanical assessment, then at least it shows that I'm doing something. So it's not to say that you're 100% wrong. And for an individual with a musculoskeletal presentation, a biomechanical assessment at some stage may be relevant. But in these chronic / complex presentations, is it really what needs to be focused on during the initial consultation? Oftentimes, no. So when I'm talking about looking at this sort of through the podiatry lens, which is what P3 Podiatry is about, is this default that we fall back to is essentially if podiatrists are thinking that all musculoskeletal pain requires a biomechanical assessment because the problem is biomechanical in nature. And Again, in these chronic/complex presentations, more often than not, this isn't the case. And this is especially true if you've got, and we've all had this client come into the clinic, right? So if you've got someone that they come into the clinic with 20 pairs of orthoses, up 10 pairs of shoes, and they've seen practitioner after practitioner after practitioner and got so many new devices, realistically, do you think that you're going to break the wheel by doing another biomechanical assessment, issuing another set of orthoses, putting them in another pair of shoes? If that's been done so many times and they're still experiencing the exact same problem, maybe there's something else at play. And there certainly are exceptions to this rule. So there are some people that we see that they have a pathology of chronicity that they will need some orthomechanical or biomechanical focus during their treatment. But more often than not, it's the subjective we should be focusing on initially, because in these chronic and complex presentations, oftentimes they're some of the primary drivers as to why this has turned into a chronic condition. So that's what we need to focus on. And so arguably one of the most important questions that we can ask our clients during the initial consultation is asking why they're seeking our help. Now, what happens more often than not, and it simply, the most common response that we get, how can I help you? Why are you seeking my help? However you phrase it, it doesn't really matter. Oftentimes the response will be, because my whatever body part hurts. Now, yes, this is a good answer, good starting point, but we need to dig deeper and go beyond that answer, because oftentimes if they're saying my whatever body part hurts, they're reporting to you a symptom. So if we just focus on the symptom and don't unpack things a little bit further and explore the reason that this symptom is there in the first place, what it's affecting, this is how we can sell ourselves short in the management formulation process, because we might be missing the mark. So in order to sort of build our understanding of this, one thing that's really good to keep at the forefront of our minds is understanding that people often don't seek help simply because of pain. They seek help because pain is disrupting some aspect of their life. And this is what we need to explore. And the reason for this is, for the most part, not sometimes no, but for the most part, humans are highly resilient creatures and we can tolerate a lot. So if we've got a pain or discomfort and it's not disruptive, we're often not that concerned about it. We don't seek help a lot of the time. And if we're able to carry on with our normal activities that we do throughout the day, going for a run, wrestling with the grandkids, taking the dog for a walk, whatever it is, if it's not causing any disruption to anything that's meaningful to us, it'll often sort of fall to the back of our mind and it's not that much of a worry. It's once the once the symptom becomes disruptive that it becomes a problem. And it's this problem that we really need to explore and flesh out, because they're seeking our help to help solve this problem, not always just fix this symptom. Now, a good analogy to think about this with, if we stop at identifying and addressing purely a symptom, it's like placing a bucket under a leaky tap to stop the puddle forming, instead of actually figuring out why the tap is leaking in the first place and focusing on fixing the leaking tap. And again, there are often some exceptions to this rule, and simply decreasing someone's pain may allow them to achieve their goals and re-engage in all of their activities. However, there are many instances in these more chronic and complex presentations where the problem and what's feeding it extends far beyond the symptom itself. So this is, the couple of things that we're going to explore, and this will hopefully give you a little bit of an insight in how the information that we can gather during this initial consultation, how it can really foster client engagement and, like I said before, set us up for treatment success. So as today's discussion is centered around how better management comes from asking better questions, what we're going to do now is we're just going to break down a few deeper layers that we need to explore from that initial response that someone might give us when we ask them, what why they're seeking our help. So the first one is the typical response. So we may say to a client, how can I help you today? What brings you in here today? Again, it doesn't really matter how you word it, but it's just essentially, why are you here? What can I help with? And so more often than not, like I said, is they will initially just describe the symptom. So it may be my whatever body part hurts, or this is burning, this is tingling, whatever it is. They have identified the symptom. Now, this is important because by identifying the symptom, that's often a barrier for them to overcome their problem or engage in an activity. So by identifying the symptom, then this does allow us to make our initial or some of our initial treatment decisions. So if we've got inflammatory pain or whatever mechanism is causing this discomfort or disruption, then by identifying the symptom, we may implement some initial treatment strategies to help settle that symptom down. And this is, if we always flick back to Greg Lehman's work, it's where we need to calm shit down before we can build shit up. So this is again where we triage. So we identify the symptom, and this may be identifying that it's an inflammatory pain or it's a highly mechanically sensitive area, whatever it is. But this will give us some insight on how we can overcome the problem. The next step, going beyond identifying the symptom, is exploring the problem. Now, what the problem is the activity or activities that the symptom is interfering with. So by identifying and exploring the problem, that is, again, what the symptom's impacting, we're able to set the overarching treatment goals goals for our management plan. So this may be returning to running, engaging in our activities of daily living, walking the dog, whatever it is. But essentially, by identifying the problem, this is what allows us to identify our metric of success, because one thing that is important for us to remember is that patients don't come in saying, I've got an 8 out of 10 pain, I want you to get me to a 0 out of 10. Literally no one does that. They come in saying, I need your help because I need to get back to being able to do whatever activity. So achieving a 0 out of 10 pain is meaningless if we can't get them to return to the activities they want to do, or we can't help them overcome their problem. Because, like I was saying before, humans are, for the most part, highly resilient creatures, and we can tolerate some pain or discomfort if it's not disruptive. So they may come in with an 8 out of 10 pain, and because pain is quite complex, and there's so many things that feed into it, especially in chronic and complex presentations, someone may initially come in with an 8 out of 10 pain, and we may help them overcome their problem and they can return to their activities. Their pain may still be a 4 out of 10, but if it's no longer disruptive, then that's a bit of a win. And you may find if it's no longer disruptive, the fact that it's not disruptive and our body and our cells are panicking less about it, then we can go from a 4 to a 3 to a 2 to a 1. So yeah, identifying the problem, like I said, this allows us to identify the overarching treatment goal that we want to get them back to. So we as clinicians will have our therapeutic goal. So we may know that we need to improve the energy storage and release capacity of the Achilles tendon or whatever our therapeutic goal is. So this is the physiological response that we want to achieve from our exercise program or our management plan. Therapeutic goal, but that doesn't resonate as much with clients as opposed to this exercise or this treatment will help you get back to running. So yeah, there's a little bit of a nuance with that, but identifying the problem allows us to identify the overarching treatment goal, which will be our metric of success. Because again, more often than not, people want to get back to an activity. It's a bit benign just going, I just want to get back to a 0 out of 10 pain, because again, it's a bit meaningless if we can't return them to whatever they want to get to in the first place. Okay, so I've identified our symptom, we've identified the problem or problems that this symptom is causing. Now we need to dig a little bit deeper and go beyond that. So this is exploring their concern. So what the concern is essentially this is what I'm worried about the symptom creating. And by exploring their concerns, this is how we're able to refine our management strategy, our management approach, and there's quite a few things that we can get as clinicians that will really influence the trajectory of the whole treatment outcome, because we will be able to refine our management plan a little bit more. So one of the things that it can do when we explore their concerns is we can reinforce what their goals are. So for example, if we go, okay, so what are you mostly concerned about this problem? Like, what are you worried about with it? So their response may be, I'm worried that I won't ever be able to run again. I'm worried I won't be able to do whatever activity again. So again, this helps us reinforce the management goal or the treatment goal. Okay. And so then going beyond this, well, not even just beyond this, but some other elements that we may be able to identify by exploring their concerns is identifying possible gaps that have existed in their previous treatment. So with this, it's okay, so what are you concerned about? So they might say, I'm worried that I'm seeing another health practitioner and I'm just going to have more of the same. I've had so many pairs of orthoses, they haven't done anything. I've done exercises before, but it didn't feel like I was getting any better. I've done exercises before and it just aggravated. So really important things to explore, because like I said, we may identify some gaps in the previous treatment. So if they're saying things like that, it's okay. Let's just use orthoses as an example for the first one. Okay, so let's just say they've had orthoses and the orthoses haven't done anything. They've changed their footwear. Footwear hasn't done anything, and they've gone through God knows how many pairs of orthoses and shoes. Has any exercise therapies and gradual reintroduction of load been implemented for the person? Yes or no? Do they have a highly reactive plantar fascia and they may require some pharmacological intervention? Yes or no? So exploring that identifies some potential treatment gaps. And then if we look at, okay, so let's just say, I've done this exercise before and I wasn't getting any better, or I did this exercise and it flared it up, it made the pain worse. Okay, with this, is a gap in the treatment simply a dosage issue? Were they underdosed as far as the physical rehabilitation to return them to the goals that they wanted to achieve? So for example, if someone has, say, Achilles tendinopathy, and they're doing bilateral or unilateral calf raises, and they might do unilateral calf raises and 3 sets of 10 repetitions. And then, okay, so their pain may have decreased to a point that it's not impacting their activities of daily living. They're waking up the next morning, there's no discomfort. So for the most part, pain has settled. Then they get given the tick of approval. Okay, you can return to running, and boom, the pain comes back, because their rehabilitation has been underdosed to functionally restore the Achilles tendon to where it needs to be to tolerate the running loads. And similar but different, if they've been doing exercises and it's flared the injury, have they been overdosed with it? So were they given unilateral calf raises, but that exceeded the tissue's tolerance? Should they have been doing bilateral calf raises, or should they have been doing bilateral isometrics? So again, exploring the concern can identify some gaps in previous treatment. And then kind of tied into this, if they're sort of concerned about certain elements, so let's just say, what are you concerned about this problem creating? One response may be, I'm worried, again, like I may never be able to get back to running, or I'm worried if I run, my tendon will rupture. This can allow us to identify some gaps in education that we may need to address with the individual. Because one of the things that I think it's Louis Gifford that says it, reassurance is a bloody good painkiller. So yeah, if we explore their concern, like I said, we can refine a few of the finer points of our management plan, identifying gaps in previous treatment, identifying gaps in education and knowledge that they may have surrounding their condition. So moving a little bit beyond exploring their concerns, we can explore their needs. And essentially, this is what they need from you during that initial consultation to help address their concerns. Now, what the need tells us is it helps us identify what we may need to focus on initially, because especially in a lot of these chronic and complex presentations, there can be a multitude of elements at play. And if we identify, say, 10 things and we try to tackle 10 things during that initial consultation, it can just be too much. So it may be, okay, yes, you've got this, and this, but items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they will maybe improve as we start to address these other elements. So we'll just park them for a little bit, we'll come back to it. So letting them know that you've heard all of their concerns, but being able to refine what the most pressing need is at that time is highly beneficial. So it can, by identifying the needs, it can help us identify what we need to focus on initially. And it can also, by doing this, it's how we can also foster engagement, because that's one of the things that sort of leads to a lot of treatment disengagement, is if someone feels like their needs aren't getting met. So if they haven't been given education to help them understand what's going on with their body and they just feel frustrated and confused, that's an unmet need. If they're sort of concerned about the fact that the problem will never go away, again, an education need hasn't been met there as well. So by identifying, like I said, what their concerns are and then what they need from you during this initial consultation allows us to triage more effectively and refine what we focus on initially during the initial consultation. So some examples of what these needs are is they may say that they're confused because they've received so many different bits of conflicting information from different healthcare practitioners. Okay, so what we may need to focus on initially is education with them and focus on their understanding to hopefully give them a sense of clarity, because that may be more pressing to them at that point in time. So that uncertainty of God, I've seen so many different people, I'm getting so many different responses. I just want a clear answer and a clear pathway on how we can start to overcome this. The pain or whatever the problem is still may be quite high, but the uncertainty and the lack of clarity might be more pressing for them initially. Contrary to this example, their primary concern and need may be more pain focused. So for some individuals, they may be thinking that the pain I've got at the minute is that intense and it's that disruptive that unless we start to get that under control, I can't even begin to think about doing exercises or doing this or whatever else I may need to do in my treatment. The pain is that bad, I just need to get it addressed. So this may open up the window that, okay, is there anything that we can do during that initial consultation where we may need to focus on pain to get some short-term relief? So would it potentially be a pharmacological intervention? Or if it's, say, the case of a highly reactive plantar fascia presentation, would implementing some low dye strapping to decrease the strain loads on the plantar fascia help decrease pain in the short term, just to open up that treatment window so we can get some symptoms under control, so we can begin to implement and tackle the more longer term parts of our management plan that we need to focus on. And then this brings us to the last piece of the puzzle: why the symptom is there in the first place, i.e. identifying the leaky tap. Now, in the cases of acute injuries, you can start with this because you can oftentimes identify a pretty clear mechanism of injury. So that's why the symptom may be there in the first place, because you sprained your ankle when you were playing netball 3 hours ago. But in the chronic and complex, oftentimes the answer to this question we can't come to or we can't identify until we've explored the symptom, identified the problem, and explored their concerns and explored their needs, because it may be, yes, they do have this pathology, but is the reason that it's turned into this persistent pathology of chronicity has it been purely a symptom-focused management, and we haven't been able to help, or a practitioner hasn't been able to help them overcome their problem, which may be functional restoration to return to a goal activity, has there been a lot of uncertainty creeping in because they've seen a few different practitioners and there's been gaps in the management plan, exercise underdosing, exercise overdosing. So again, by exploring the why they're there in the first place, and like I said, identifying what the symptom is, the problem that it's causing, the concerns that it's causing, and the needs that they need from you at that point in time, that's often how we can reverse engineer and identify why the problem is there in the first place. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of an insight in how we can approach some of the more chronic and complex musculoskeletal presentations a little bit better to help improve our outcomes. And if you'd like to download our free resource to help guide you through the exercise prescription process, it's the Movement Prescription Blueprint, and you can download this at progressivepodiatryproject.com/blueprint. And that's it for today. I hope you've gotten something out of this, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.